In this video, I'm going to show you how to get started with Firebase 9 in a Vue 3 project. We're going to create this sexy little app called Badass Todo. We're going to get it looking gorgeous using Bulma. We're going to get it all working on the front end first using Vue 3 and the composition API so that we can display to-dos, add a to-do, mark a to-do as done and delete a to-do. And then we're going to hook it all up to a Firebase 9 Cloud Firestore database with full CRUD capabilities and real-time data sync across devices, so that if we add a to-do on one device or browser, we instantly see the change on another device or browser. Let's get started by creating a Vue 3 project. So I'm going to Google Vue 3 and jump to the doc site and install and scroll down. So we need to have Node.js installed, and if you click on this link, you can install that here. You probably want to install the one on the left. Then we can create a new Vue project with this command here. So I'm going to copy that and jump to my terminal, which is running in VS Code. And I'm going to make sure I'm in the folder where I store my projects and run this command. And for the project name and folder name, I'm going to use Vue 3-Firebase 9-tutorial. And I'm going to hit enter and choose no to all of the options. And so now we just need to cd into the folder, run npm install and run npm run dev. And I can see the folder it's created there. I'm going to drag that into VS Code, open up the terminal, run npm install to install the dependencies, and that's finished. So I'm going to run npm run dev to launch the app. And command and click on this link, and we now see the basic Vue app running in the browser. So let's just simplify this a bit. I'm going to jump to index.html in the root of our folder and just change the title here to Badass Todo, save that, and we see that updated. And I'm going to jump to the root app component app.vue in source app.vue, and I'm just going to select everything here and delete it and just add a template tag, and I'll just put the text Badass Todo in there for now, save that. And we can now delete everything in this components folder, source components. So I'm going to select everything in here and right click and delete. And we see an error, but if we reload the page, the error disappears. Let's use the Bulma CSS library to make our app look sexy as hell. So I'm going to jump to bulma.io. And this is not a Bulma tutorial, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about Bulma. We're just going to use it to save us having to write tons of CSS. So we can install this with npm install Bulma. So I'm going to jump to my terminal, kill the dev process, and run this command. And that's finished, so I'm just going to launch the app again with npm run dev. And if we go into the node modules folder, we can see the Bulma folder here and the CSS folder. And we want to import this bulma.min.css file. So I'm going to right click and copy the relative path. Okay, now we're going to import this CSS file. So let's add some style tags. And we'll add @import and quotes and a semicolon. And we'll paste in that path that we copied. And we can get rid of the node modules /bit and save that. And that seems to have worked because we can see the style of our text has changed a bit. Now let's add an input and a button that we can use to add a to-do. So we'll jump to Bulma and getting started. And we're going to go to form and general. And we're going to scroll down a bit to this example here, which says find a repository. This looks like just what we need. So I'm going to copy this example and we're going to paste it into our template tags and save that. Now this is stretched right across the width of our page, which doesn't look too clever. So let's restrict the width of our app and add a little bit of padding as well. So I'm going to add a div at the top here with a class of badass-todo. And I'm going to stick everything inside there. And let's add some CSS here. So we're going to target this Badass Todo class. We're going to give it a max width of 400 pixels. We're going to add a padding of 20 pixels. And to put it in the center, we're going to add a margin, set the vertical to 0 and the horizontal to auto to force this to be in the middle. Now let's update the placeholder on this input, and that's here. I'm just going to change that to add a to do and save that. And let's change the text on this button here to add. Save that. And let's also add a title to the top using some Bulma classes. So I'm going to add a div with a class of title and a class of has text centered to center the text. And we're just going to put Badass To Do. Save that. And this is looking pretty sweet. Let's use Bulma's card component for our list of to-dos. So we'll jump back to Bulma. I'm going to go to components and card. And we're going to scroll down to this basic example here and copy the code. And we'll paste that after this div with a class of field. Paste that in there and indent it and save that. And let's add a bit of bottom margin to this top field here. So this div with a class of field here, I'm going to add a class of MB for margin bottom -5. Save that. And I'll change the text inside this card. I'll just put shave my butt. Save that. And let's add a couple of buttons here for marking a to-do as done and for deleting a button. So after this text here, I'm going to add a button with a class of button. And I'm going to use a HTML entity to add a check symbol here. So we're going to add and check and semicolon. Save that. And let's duplicate this button. And in the other button, we're going to use the cross entity. Save that for our delete button. And this first button, I'm going to give that a class of is-light to give it this gray color. And the delete button, we're going to give it a class of is-danger to give it this red color. And all of these classes are documented on the Bulma site. So let's use Bulma's column system to make sure these buttons are always over on the right. So we're going to put our text in a column and we're going to put these buttons in a column. So at the top of this div with a class of content, I'm going to add a div with a class of columns. And then inside that, I'm going to add a div with a class of column where we can place our text, and we'll duplicate that and create another column for our buttons. So I'm going to cut this text and paste it into the first column. And then I'm going to cut these buttons and place them in this second column and save that. And to make sure our columns don't stack on mobile like this, we can add a div to this div with a class of columns of is-mobile, save that. And to make sure all of the content of these columns is vertically centered, we can add a class of is-v centered. Save that. Now let's reduce the width of this second column, which is here. So we're going to add a class of is-5 and save that. And to make sure the buttons are aligned to the right, I'm going to add a class of has-text-right. Save that. And these buttons are stuck right together. So let's add a little bit of left margin to this second button, which is here. So we'll add a class of ML for margin left -2 and save that. And this is looking pretty good. Let's make sure it's going to look okay with multiple to-dos. And a quick hack we can do is just add a v-for directive to this card component. I'm going to split the attributes on that. And I'm doing that with the split HTML attributes extension, which you can get from the VS Code extension store. And we can just add v-for equals, and then I in, and then however many to-dos we want to display. I'll just put 3 and save that. So we need a little bit of margin at the bottom of each to-do because they're all stuck together. So let's add a class to this card of MB-5 to add some bottom margin. Okay, so we now have all of the elements and styles we need to start building our app. Let's set up a reactive data ref where we can store our to-dos. So we need to add a script section. I'll add that between the template and the style section. So we're going to add our script setup tags. And I'm just going to add a block comment here which says imports. And we're going to import ref from view. Then I'll add another block comment which says to-dos. And we'll create a constant called to-dos. Set that equal to a ref. And we'll make this an array. And we'll add an object for each to-do. So we'll give each of our to-dos an ID property. I'll just set this first one to ID1. And we'll give it a content property for the text. So we'll just put shave my butt for the first one. And we'll also add a done property for determining whether or not a to-do is done. And we'll set this to false. And then I'm just going to duplicate this object, get rid of the comma. We'll set the ID on the second one to ID2, and we'll set the content to wash my butt, and we'll save that. Let's display these to-dos on the page. So we'll jump up to this card component, and we'll adjust this v4 directive, and we'll do v4 to do in to-dos. So this is going to loop through this to-dos array that we just created, and as it's looping through, this object will be available at the placeholder to do. So to get the text for each to do, we can just do double curly braces here in this first column and do to do.content. Let's save that. And it's got a bit funky. Let's just reload the page. And we can now see the to-dos in our to-do array ref on the page. Let's allow our user to add a to-do. So let's surround this input and the button in a form so that it can be submitted. So let's scroll up to this first div with a class of field, and let's create a form. I'll get rid of the action, and we'll move this field into this form. And let's also change this button, which is currently an A tag, to a button tag so that we can submit this form with this button. And let's add a submit handler to this form. So at submit, we'll add the .prevent modifier to prevent the page from being reloaded when we submit this sucker. And we'll trigger a method called add to do. So let's jump down to our script section. And I'll add a comment here which just says add to do, and we'll create this method. So const add to do equals an arrow function. And for now, we'll just log out add to do, and we'll save that. Open up the console, and I'll just zoom in a bit to that. And if we type something in and hit enter, we can see add to do being logged out. Or if we click on the add button, again, we see add to do being logged out. Now let's set up a ref for this input so we can actually grab the text that the user entered. So above this constant here, I'll create another constant called new to do content. We'll set that equal to a ref with an initial value of an empty string. Now let's bind this ref to the input. So we'll jump up to the input, which is here, and we'll split the attributes on that, and we'll add a v model directive and set that to this ref we created, which is called new to do content. I'll copy that and paste that into this v model and save that. And if we type something into this string here, we should see it updated, and yeah, we do. So that's all hooked up. So I'll set that back to an empty string and save that. Now let's disable this add button if this input is empty. So if this string is empty. So we'll jump up to the add button, which is here, split the attributes, and we'll bind to the disabled attribute. And we're going to disable this when this ref is empty. So we can just do not new to do content. Save that. And that button is now disabled, but if we type something in, it becomes enabled again. So let's actually add the to do when this form is submitted. So let's jump down to our script section. So we want to create an object like this with an ID property, a content property, which we can pull from this input, which is bound to this new to do content ref, and a done property. And then we just want to push that object to this to-dos ref array, and we should see it on the page. So for now, I'm just going to comment out these two to-dos, which we've hard coded, and save that. And let's jump to our add to do method. So we want to set up a new object. So I'm going to create a constant called new to do, set that equal to an object. And so we're going to need an ID property. So ID, and I'll just hard code this for now as ID1. And we're going to need a content property, and we're going to grab that from the value of this new to do content ref, which is bound to the input. So we can set this to new to do content.value, and we're going to need a done property, which we're going to set to false by default. Now we're going to need a unique ID for each of our to-dos. So for now, I'm just going to use the UUID library to generate unique IDs for us. However, later on when we hook this up to Firebase, we're going to allow Firebase to generate unique IDs for us. But for now, I'm just going to Google npm UUID and jump to the UUID library page. And there's something funky going on with the README here. Let's jump to the GitHub page. And we can install this with npm install UUID. So let's copy that, jump to our terminal, kill the dev process and run this command. And then launch our app again with npm run dev. We need to import this. So I'm going to copy this import line, jump to the top of our script section, and paste that in here. And to generate a unique ID, we just need to run this UUID v4 method. So I'm going to copy that, jump down to our add to do method, and get rid of this string we've hard coded and paste in this UUID v4 method. Let's just make sure it's creating this object correctly. So let's just log out new to do and save that, reload our app and type something in, shave my butt. And if we look at the console, we can see this object being logged out. And that seems to be working. We have a unique ID and we have the content property set to the text that the user typed, and we have the done property set to false. So now we just need to push this new to do object to this to dos array, and we should see it on the page. And in fact, let's unshift it so that new to dos get added to the top of the list and not the bottom of the list. So now we can just do todos.value.unshift, and we're going to pass in this new to do object. So I'll copy that and paste it in here, save that, reload, and let's see if this is working. So shave my butt and wash my butt. And this seems to be working, and new to-dos are being added to the top of the list. However, after we add a to-do, it's still leaving this input populated with the text they just entered. So let's clear this out. So after we unshift the new to-do object to the to-dos array, we can just set this new to-do content ref back to an empty string. So we can just do new to-do content.value equals empty string. Let's save that and try this out. So shave my butt and wash my butt. And yeah, this field is now being cleared out. Let's allow the user to delete a to-do when this delete button is clicked. So for now, I'm just going to uncomment these hard-coded to-dos here and save that, just so we don't have to keep adding to-dos while we're working on this. So each of our to-dos has a unique ID. So we could use this ID to determine which to-do should be deleted when the delete button is clicked. So let's jump to this delete button, and that's here. And we'll split the attributes on that, add a click handler, and we'll trigger a method called delete to-do. And we'll pass in the to-do ID. So that's going to be available at todo.id. So todo.id. Let's jump down to the script section. We'll add a new section here called delete to do, and we'll create this method. So const delete to do equals an arrow function. We're going to pass in that ID, and let's just log out delete to do, and we'll log out this ID as well and make sure that's getting through. So I'll save that, reload, click on a delete button, and yeah, we can see ID 1 being logged out. And if we click on the other delete button, we see ID 2 being logged out. So now let's remove the to-do which has the ID that's being passed into this method. So let's jump down to the delete to-do method, and we could use a filter to do this. So let's grab our to-dos array ref at todos.value, and we're going to overwrite that with todos.value, except we're going to filter it with the filter method. So we'll add .filter. And this is going to loop through every item in our to-dos array. And as it's looping through, it's going to need a placeholder. So we can use to-do for the placeholder, add an arrow function. And we want to return all items whose ID are not equal to this ID that we want to delete. So we're going to grab all items which don't have this ID and reassign those items back to todos.value, back to this array here, which should then remove the item which does have this ID. So in this arrow function, we can just do to-do.id is not equal to ID. this ID that we're passing in. So let's save that and see if that's working. I'll reload, click on delete, and that seems to be working. Let's allow our user to mark a task as done when they click on this button. First, let's set up some styles to make a done task look a little bit different. So I'm going to jump to our hard-coded list of to-dos here, and I'm going to set the done property on the second one to true. And I'll save that. And let's give this card a green background if the to-do is done. So we'll jump up to our card, which is here, and we're going to bind to the class attribute. And we're going to add a class of has-background-success-light, but only when the done property in this to-do object is true. So only if to-do.done. So let's save that. And we can now see this second to-do has a light green background. And let's also make this done button green as well when a to-do is done. So we'll scroll down to that button, which is here, and we'll split the attributes on that sucker, and we'll bind to the class attribute again. And we'll use a ternary if statement here. So if to-do.done is true, we're going to add a class of is-success, which will give it a green color. Otherwise, we're going to add this class is-light to give it a gray color, is-light. And then let's remove this hard-coded class and save that. And we can now see the done to-do has this green button. And let's also make this text green as well when the to-do is done, and also strike it through. So let's jump to this column here where the to-do content is, split the attributes on that. And again, we'll bind to the class attribute. And we're going to add a class of has-text-success, but only when to-do.done is true. Save that. And that text is now green. And let's also add another class, and we'll call this line-through. There's no strike through class available in Bulma, so we'll have to add some CSS for this. So let's jump down to our style, and we'll target this line through class, line-through. And we'll set the text decoration to line-through. Save that. And the text now has a line through it, but only when the to-do is done. So now let's add a method for toggling the done property in the to-do when this button is clicked. So if it's false, we're going to set it to true when we click this, or if it's true, then we're going to set it back to false when we click this. So let's jump up to this button, which is here, and we'll add a click handler to that. So at click equals, and we'll trigger a method called toggle done. And again, we'll pass in the to-do ID so that we can work out which to-do to actually update. So we'll pass in to-do.id, and let's create this toggle done method. Scroll down to the script section, and I'll add a comment here which says toggle done, and create this method const toggle done, pass in the ID, and for now let's log out toggle done, and we'll log out the ID as well, make sure that's getting through. Save that, reload, click on the button, and yeah, we can see the ID is getting through. So now we can use the find index method to find the position of the to-do in our array, which has this ID. And then we can use that position, that index, to update the correct to-do. So let's set up a constant called index, and we'll fire the find index method on our to-dos array ref. So todos.value.find index. And this is going to loop through all of the items in our array. So we're going to need a placeholder. We'll just use to-do for that. Then we need an arrow function, and we want to find the index of the item where the ID is equal to this ID that we're passing in. So we can just do to-do.id is equal to ID. So let's log out this index and make sure that's working. And I'll remove this first console log and save that. So if we click on the done button on the first item, we can see index 0. And if we click on the second one, we can see index 1. So now we can access the to-do in our array at this position and update the done property. So we can access our to-dos array at todos.value, and then we can access the item at this position with square brackets index. And we want to update the done property, so we can do .done. And we want to set that equal to the opposite of itself. So if this is true, we're going to set it to false. And if it's false, we're going to set it to true. So we can just set this to not, and then the same thing again. So let's save that and see if that's working. Yeah, it seems to be working, and it's toggling the done property and toggling a to-do to be done or not done. So let's comment out our hard-coded to-dos and just make sure everything is working from scratch. Reload, and let's add some to-dos. So shave my butt, wash my butt. And what else do we need to do to our butt? Moisturize. Yeah, you got to moisturize that butt. Got to keep that thing crinkle-free for the ladies. So moisturize my butt. So we can add to-dos, and they're all in the correct order. And we can mark them as done, and we can delete them as well. Okay, so this app is all working locally now. Let's hook this sucker up to a Firebase 9 Cloud Firestore database. So we're going to jump to firebase.google.com, and you need to sign in with a Gmail account. If you're already signed into Chrome with a Gmail account, you can just use that. And once you're signed in, just click on Get Started, and you can see all of your projects here. So let's click on Add Project, and we're going to call this Badass Todo. Click on Continue. I'm going to disable Google Analytics and click on Create Project. And that's finished, so let's click on Continue. And to connect to our Firebase project, we need to create a Firebase app. And to do that, we use these buttons here. And we want to create a web project, so we're going to click on this web button. And I'm going to use the same name here, Badass Todo, and click on Register App. And it shows us how to connect to our Firebase app. So we need to install Firebase first with npm install Firebase. So let's jump to our terminal, kill the dev process, and run this command. That's finished installing, so let's launch our app again with npm run dev. Let's copy this code example here, which allows us to connect to our Firebase app. I'm going to copy that, and we're going to paste this into a new file. So in the source folder, I'm going to create a folder called Firebase. And I'm going to create a file in there called index.js. We're just going to paste in this code, and I'm going to remove all of the comments, and I'm going to remove all of the semicolons because I'm not generally using them, and I'm going to replace all of the double quotes with single quotes and save that. So all this is doing is firing this initialize app method and passing in this config object, which has our project's API key and some other details, so that Firebase knows which project we should connect to. And it's just assigning that initialized app to this app constant. Let's create a Cloud Firestore database where we can store our to-dos. So I'm going to click on Continue to Console, and then Firestore Database. Then we're going to click on Create Database. And we're going to choose Start in Test Mode. And this will make our app completely insecure. It will mean that anybody will be able to read from or write to our database. And in order to protect a Firestore database, you need to add some security rules. And if you want to learn more about that, then check out my Udemy course, View 3 Composition API with Pinia, Firebase, and Vite. But when you're getting started, it's much easier to just have it in test mode. So let's click on Next. And we could choose a location for our database. I'm just going to use the default and click on Enable. Okay, it's finished creating the database. And so Cloud Firestore databases are made up of collections. And each collection contains documents. And each document is just made up of a bunch of fields or properties. So let's create a collection for our to-dos. We'll click on Start Collection. And we'll call this collection To-dos. And click on Next. And let's add a couple of documents to this collection for a couple of to-dos. So for the document ID, I'm going to click on Auto ID so that Firebase generates a unique ID for us. And then we can add some fields. So if we jump to our to-dos array here, we just need a content field and a done field for each of our to-dos. So we'll add a field called content, and this is going to be a string, and I'll set the value to wash my butt. And then let's add another field, and this will be our done field, and we'll set the type to Boolean and give this an initial value of false, and click on save. So we now have a collection called to-dos with one document in it, and we can see the unique ID here. So let's add another document for another to-do. So we'll click on add document, auto ID, and we'll set the content field to shave my butt. And we'll add the done field, again set that to a Boolean with an initial value of false, and click on save. Okay, so we now have a to-dos collection with two documents for two to-dos. But before we can grab these documents and display them in our app, we need to connect to this database. So up at the top here, I'm going to click on go to docs, and then we're going to go to build and Firestore. Then on the left here, we're going to go to get started. And we've already done this bit. We've already created a Cloud Firestore database. So let's scroll down to set up your development environment. And for all of these code examples, you want to make sure you have web version 9 selected. And so to access our Firestore database, we need to import this get Firestore method from Firebase/Firestore. So let's copy this line and jump to the new file we just created, and we'll paste this import to the top. And I'll replace the double quotes with single quotes. And let's jump back to the docs and scroll down a bit. So all we need to do to access our database is fire this get Firestore method and pass in the app, which we already have set up here, and then just assign this to a constant. So let's copy this and we'll paste it at the bottom of this file. And now let's export this DB constant so we can use it anywhere in our app. So we'll just add export and then DB. And so we can now use this DB constant anywhere in our app to access our Cloud Firestore database, to grab all of the documents in a collection, to delete a document, and to update a document. Let's import this DB constant into our app.view file so that we can access our database. So let's jump to app.view, and then at the top here, we're going to import DB from @/Firebase. And this @ is just an alias to our source folder. So let's save that. So what we want to do here is grab all these documents from our to-dos collection and add them to our to-dos array ref here so that we can see them on the page. So I'm going to jump back to the Firebase docs, and we're going to go to read data, get data once, and we're going to scroll down to get all documents in a collection. So to do this, we're going to need to import these two methods from Firebase/Firestore. So let's copy this import line, and we'll paste that above our DB import. And I'm just going to replace the double quotes with single quotes. And let's copy this example here. And so we want to fire this code when our app first starts. So we could do this in a mounted hook. So at the top here, I'm just going to add onMounted to our list of imports from View. And then after our to-dos array, I'm going to add a block comment which says get to-dos. And we'll add an onMounted hook. And we'll just log out mounted, save that and make sure that's working, reload the app, and yeah, we can see mounted being logged out. So now let's paste this example code into this onMounted hook and fix the indentation. And I'm just going to stretch this out a bit and remove the semicolons and get rid of this comment. So this collection method here is going to grab the collection specified here from the database specified here. And we're already pulling our database in with this DB constant, so we can leave this as it is. But we want to grab our to-dos collection because that's what we've called it here in our Firestore database. So let's replace this cities string with to-dos. So this collection method is now going to grab our to-dos collection, and then this getDocs method is going to grab all of the documents from that collection. And this is asynchronous. It's going to take some time. we can see the await keyword here. And because we're using await, we'll need to make our onMounted hook asynchronous by adding the async keyword here. But once it's got all of the documents from that collection, it's going to assign them to this query snapshot constant. And once that's ready, it's going to loop through each document in that collection. And it's going to log out the document ID for each document and the document data for each document. And this document data will just be an object containing all of the fields from that document. So let's just save this and reload and see what we see logged out in the console. And we can see both of our documents being logged out. We can see the document ID, which is this ID here, and the document data for each document as well, which is just an object containing our content property and our done property. So now we just need to set up an object for each of our to-dos, where each object has an ID property, a content property, and a done property, and then push that object to this to-dos array. And we should then see them on the page. But first, let's just set up a local array where we can store these to-do objects. So I'm going to create a variable called FB to-dos, set that equal to an empty array, and then we'll populate this array with objects for each of our to-dos. So I'll set up a new constant here for each to-do, set this equal to an object, and each to-do is going to need an ID property, and we can see we can get the document ID from doc.id. So we'll set this to doc.id, and we're going to need a content property, and we can grab that from this doc.data method. So this is going to be at doc.data parentheses .content. So doc.data parentheses .content, and we're going to need the done property as well. And again, this is going to be at doc.data parentheses .done. So we then want to push this object to this local array here. So we can just do FB to-dos.push to do. And once this for each loop is completed, then this array here should be populated with an object for each of our to-dos. And so we can then just overwrite our Todos Ref array here with this FB to-dos array, and we should see all of our to-dos on the page. So after this for each, let's access our Todos Ref. So todos.value, and we'll set that equal to this array here, FB to-dos. So let's save that and see if that's working. Reload the page, and we can now see our two to-dos on the page. Except now they're not hard-coded into this to-dos array ref. They're instead being pulled from our to-dos collection in our Firestore database. One of the best features of Firebase is its real-time data capabilities, which means that if, let's say, two different people are using the app at the same time, one person could add a to-do or delete a to-do, and the other person would see the change instantly. However, if we jump to our Firestore database and edit one of our to-dos, so if I just change the content in this wash my butt to-do to wash my butt thoroughly, and click update, then the to-do is updated on Firestore, but we don't see the change on our page. And likewise, if we add a new document, so we'll set the content to moisturize my butt and add the done field, set that to a boolean of false, and click on save. Again, we have this new document in our database, but we don't see it on the page. We will only see the changes if we reload. So if I reload the page, then we now see the new to-do, and we see the update to this to-do. So let's change our code so that we grab all of the documents initially when our app starts, just like we're doing now, but so that we also listen out for changes. So that whenever a new document is added or updated or deleted, we can detect that change, grab the latest documents, and update our view in real time. So let's jump back to the Firebase docs. And on the left here, we're going to jump to listen for real-time updates. And we're going to jump down to listen to multiple documents in a collection. So we can use this on snapshot method instead of the getDocs method to do this. So it will grab an initial snapshot of all the data, all of the documents, but it will also listen out for changes to the documents as well. And if there's a change, it will fire the callback again. And this example is a bit more complicated than we need right now because it's also querying the data, and we will get into querying data later on. But for now, let's just copy from on snapshot onwards and copy that. And I'll drag Firestore back over here and jump to our code. And let's jump to our on mounted hook and just comment out everything we've done so far. And paste in this example, indent it. And we need to import this on snapshot method from Firebase instead of the getDocs method. So let's jump up to our imports and replace getDocs with on snapshot. And let's jump back down to our on snapshot handler. And so this on snapshot method is going to work a lot like the getDocs method. It's going to grab the collection or query that we specify in this first parameter, and it's going to return a query snapshot. So we can just replace this queue variable with this collection method that we used before. So let's copy that from here and paste it over this queue. So it's going to grab all of the documents from our to-dos collection and return all of the documents in a snapshot in this query snapshot variable. And it's going to create an empty array called cities. And then it's going to loop through all of the documents in that collection and push to this constant here. So let's rename this array to FB to-dos. And I'm just going to get rid of the semicolons and this console log. So it's going to loop through every document in the snapshot just like before. So we can just copy the code we used before where we set up the to-do as an object with all of the properties and then pushed it to this array. So let's copy that and paste it inside this for each and remove the comments. So this is just going to loop through each document in the collection, set up a object for each to do with the ID field, content and done, and then push that object to this array here. And so once that's all done, then we just need to assign this FB to-dos array to our to-dos array ref here, and we should see the to-dos on the page. So after this for each, we can just do to-dos.value to access our to-dos ref array and set that equal to this FB to-dos array, FB to-dos array. So this is going to fire when our app first starts up. It's going to grab all of the documents, but it's also going to keep on listening so that whenever there's a change in our database, whenever a to-do is added, edited, or deleted, then this will fire again. And it's going to loop through the snapshot again and repopulate our to-dos array ref with the latest documents. So let's remove all of these comments from before. Oh, and because we're not using await anymore, we can remove this async keyword. Let's save that and see if it's working. So I'll drag the database over here and reload our app. So again, we can see all of our to-dos when the app first starts. But now if we make a change to our data on Firestore, then the on snapshot listener should be fired again, and it should grab the latest data and add the latest to-dos to our to-dos array ref. So if we jump to this moisturize my butt to do and we change this done property to true and click on update, then we can see that update instantly on the page. And likewise, if I delete this to do by clicking on these dots and clicking delete document, then again, we see the change instantly on our page. And if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you smash the like button and leave a comment. Tell me about your butt care routine. And also, if you want to go deeper with Firebase, then check out my course at dannys.link/composition API, Vue.js 3, composition API with Pinia, Firebase 9 and Vite, which is currently rated 4.8 stars out of 5. And I'll tell you a bit more about this course later on. Let's allow our user to add a to-do directly to our Firestore database. So currently when the user types something into this field and clicks on add, this add to-do method is fired, and we're then setting up an object for a to-do with ID, content and done properties. And then we're just unshifting that object to our to-dos array ref, and we can then see the to-do on the page. Well, let's instead add a to-do directly to our Firestore database as a document. And because we have this on snapshot listener, which is always listening for changes, then just by adding the document to this to-dos collection, we should see it instantly added to the page. So let's jump back to the docs and we'll go to add and manage data and add data. And there are two different methods we can use to add a document to our Firestore database. The first one is this setDoc method. And we can use this method if we want to specify our own unique IDs in this third parameter here. And we could use this since we're already generating unique IDs using the UUID library. However, we can also use a different method and allow Firebase to generate these unique IDs for us. And then we can just remove this UID library from our project and lighten the load a little bit. So if we scroll down a bit to add a document and this second example, we can use this addDoc method instead. And all we need to do is specify the collection we want to add the document to, and then just provide an object with all of the fields that we want added to that new document. So first, let's import this addDoc method from Firebase/Firestore. So we'll add that here, addDoc. Let's copy this example. And if we want to access the document ID after this document has been added, then we can assign this to a constant and wait for that constant to be populated, and we can then get the ID from that constant. But we're not going to need to do that, so I'm just going to copy from await down to here. So I'll copy that, and let's jump to our add to do method, which is here. And inside this method, let's comment out everything except this line, which is clearing out the input. So we'll comment out this constant and this unshift line. And let's paste in this example and indent it a little bit. So this is just going to add a document to the collection we specify here. So let's change this cities to to-dos. And we want to add a content field. And we're going to grab that content from this new to-do content ref, which is bound to this input. So we'll set that to new to-do content.value. And we're also going to need a done property, which we want to set to false initially. Let's just remove everything we've commented out. And we can also remove this await keyword, because if we leave that in, then it will wait until this is complete before it fires this line, which might mean that we get a delay between adding a task and this field being cleared out. So let's just remove that await keyword. Let's see if this is working. So let's save that and reload. And let's drag the database over here. I'll just reload that. And let's add a new to-do here. So moisturize my butt. And we can see the document was added to Firestore. And we can see that here. And we can also see it was instantly added to our page as well. Because remember, we have this on snapshot listener, which is always running, which is going to grab the latest documents and add them to our to-dos array every time there's a change. So let's just do a bit of tidying up here. We're no longer using this UUID library. So let's jump to the terminal, kill the dev process and run npm uninstall UUID. Let's remove this import from our code as well and save that. And launch our app again with npm run dev. And if we look at our onSnapshot method and this addDoc method, we're using the same collection reference in both of these methods, here and here. So let's stick that in a constant, which we can reuse. So up at the top here, after the imports, I'll add a new comment which says Firebase refs. And we'll create a constant called to-dos collection ref. And we'll set that equal to this collection method. So I'll copy that from here and paste that here. And I'll copy this constant name and we'll paste that over this collection method here. And also over this collection method here. And let's just save that and reload, make sure everything is still working. So after I've washed my butt, shaved my butt and moisturized my butt, I'm going to decorate that sucker. Get some nice stickers on there, maybe some transfers. Let's allow the user to delete a to-do on Firebase. Now currently when the user clicks on this delete button, this delete to-do method is fired. We pass in the ID and then we remove the to-do with the corresponding ID from our to-dos array ref by using a filter. Well, let's instead in this method delete the document in our to-dos collection in our Firestore database which has this ID. So let's jump to the docs and we're going to go to delete data. We can use this delete doc method to do this. This is nice and simple. We just need to pass in the database, the collection, and the ID of the document we want to delete. So let's import this delete doc method from Firestore. So let's jump to our imports and we'll add that here, delete doc. Let's jump back to this example and we'll copy this delete doc method here and jump down to our delete to do method. And we'll just paste that over our existing code. And we can just replace these first two parameters with our to-dos collection ref, which we've set up here. So let's copy the name of that. And we'll paste it over these first two parameters. And this final parameter should be the ID of the document we want to delete. And we're passing that ID in here. So we can just replace this with ID. So let's save that and see if it's working. I'm going to drag the database over here and jump to our app. Let's click the delete button on this moisturize one. And we have an error here. Doc is not defined. I guess we also need to import this doc method. So let's just add that to our imports. So I'll add that here. Let's save that and reload and try again. Get the database showing and we'll click on delete. And we can see it was immediately deleted from our Firestore database. And because we have that snapshot listener running, we see it removed from our page as well. Let's allow the user to mark a task as done or not done directly in our Firestore database. So currently when this done button is clicked, this toggle done method is fired. We pass in the to-do ID. We find the index of the corresponding to-do with that ID in our to-dos array ref. And then we just set the done property of that to-do to the opposite of itself. So if it's true, we set it to false, and if it's false, we set it to true. So let's instead actually update the done property of the corresponding to-do in our to-dos collection in our Firestore database. So let's jump to the Firebase docs and we'll jump back up to add data. And then we'll jump to update a document. And we can use this update doc method to update a document. So all we need to do is pass in a reference to the database, the collection, and the ID of the document we want to update. And then just pass in an object containing only the fields that we want to update. So let's import this update doc method from Firestore. So I'll jump back up to our imports and we'll add update doc to this list of imports. Let's copy this example here and jump back to our toggle done method. And I'll paste that in here. And instead of putting this reference here into a constant and using that constant here, I'm just going to copy this doc method and paste it over this constant name and get rid of the constant and the comment. And again, we can just replace these first two parameters with our to-dos collection ref. So I'm going to copy the name of that from here and paste it over these first two parameters. And the final parameter should be the ID of the document we want to update. And we're passing that into this method here. So let's replace this string with ID. And now we just want to pass all of the fields that we want to update into this object. And all we want to update is the done property or the done field. So let's add the done property. And we're already grabbing the current value of the done property of the item that they clicked on here. So we can just set this to the opposite of this. So I'll just add an exclamation mark and paste this in. And we no longer need to manipulate the item in our state directly. So let's just remove this line And we don't need this await keyword either, because we're not trying to do anything after we've waited for this to complete. So let's just get rid of that await keyword. And let's save that and see if it's working. I'll reload the page and we'll get the database over here. And let's find this decorate my butt document, and that one's here. And done is currently set to false. And if we click on this done button, we can see it was updated to true on Firestore. And we also see the change instantly on our page as well because of our snapshot listener. And let's just make sure we can toggle it back as well. And yeah, that's also working. So by default, when we grab all of our to-dos from our to-dos collection using either the onSnapshot method or the getDocs method, they're going to be ordered by these unique IDs generated by Firebase. But we want them to be ordered by date in descending order so that our latest to-do is always at the top. And we can do this using a query. But first we need each of our documents, each of our to-dos, to have a field that we can actually order them by. So we need some kind of date field. So let's delete all of our documents. I'm going to click on these three dots here and just delete the collection. Type in the name of the collection and click on delete. And let's jump back to our code and to our add to do method. So when we add a new to do or a new document to the to dos collection, we're adding the content field and the done field, but let's also add a date field. And we'll set this to the current date timestamp using date.now parentheses. So let's save that, reload our app, and we'll add some to-dos. And just so we can see what's going on with the ordering, I'm going to call them first but task, second but task, third but task, and fourth but task. So we can see that these are not in any particular order. But if we jump back to our Firestore database and reload the page, we can see that each of our documents now has this date field, which we can use to order these to-dos in descending date order. So let's jump back to the Firebase docs and let's go to read data and order and limit data. Let's scroll down and look at this second example. So what we can do is use this query method to create a query. And all we do is pass our collection ref into this query as the first parameter. And then we can use this order by method to order these documents by a particular field. And we specify the name of the field in the first parameter here. And if we want to order them in descending order, we can pass in this second parameter, which we set to desk. And we can also limit the number of results as well, if we want to, with this limit method. So for now, let's import these three methods, query, order by, and limit from Firestore. So I'll copy those, jump to our imports. And this line is getting a bit long here, so let's break it up a bit. I'll stick collection and onSnapshot on one line, and then these doc methods on a second line. And these new ones, we'll paste them onto a third line. So let's save that. Let's copy this example here, this constant. And we'll jump to our Firebase refs section and we'll paste that in here. Let's stretch this out a bit. And we'll call this constant to-dos collection query. So we want to pass in our collection ref as the first parameter. So let's copy the name of that and paste that here. I'm just going to replace these quotes with single quotes. So we want to order by the date field, this field here, which we've just added. So let's change that to date. And we do want to order these in descending order, so we'll leave that second parameter there. And we can also limit our results as well, but I'm just going to remove that for now and save that. So now that our query is set up, we can pass this into this onSnapshot handler instead of our basic collection ref. So let's replace this constant name with to-dos collection query, and let's save that. So if we reload now, we can see all of our to-dos are in reverse date order, because from the bottom we see first, second, third, and fourth. And we can also limit our results as well. If we jump back to our query, we can just add the limit method, and pass in a number such as 2. And if we save that, we now only see 2 results on the page. But limiting doesn't make much sense for this app, so I'm just going to remove that method from our query and also remove it from our import as well. And that's here, so I'll get rid of that and save. Okay, so let's delete our entire collection and just make sure everything is working from scratch. So I'll delete the to-dos collection, jump back to the app and reload, and let's add some to-dos. So shave, but, wash, but, moisturize, but, decorate, but. So we can add to-dos, we can mark them as done, and we can delete them as well. And let's just make sure the real-time data sync will work across devices. So I'm going to copy the URL of our app, jump to Safari, a different browser, paste that in. So if we add a to-do on Safari, moisturize but, we see that instantly appear on Chrome. And if we mark a to-do as done on Chrome, we instantly see it updated on Safari. And if we delete some to-dos on Safari, again, we see the update instantly on Chrome. And if you want to go deeper with Firebase 9, then just jump to dannys.link/composition API and check out my course, Vue.js 3 Composition API with Pinia, Firebase 9 and Vite. And if you use that link, dannys.link/composition API, it'll automatically apply my latest discount. So in this course, you'll learn a lot more about Firebase, including authentication so that we can allow multiple users to register, log in and log out of our app, how to add security rules to protect our users' data so that one user can only ever access their own data and not any other user's data, and how to build the finished app for production and host it on Firebase hosting. And you'll also learn all of the basics of Vue 3 and the Composition API, including all of the key differences from the Options API, and you'll learn all the basics of state management using Pinia as well. And if you want to learn more about the course, I'll leave you with the promo video. If you're already familiar with Vue 2 and the Options API, then this course will teach you everything you need to know to switch over to and get started with Vue 3 and the incredible new Composition API. My name's Danny. I'm an indie app developer and creator of Fudgit, the highest rated personal finance app for iOS, Android, Mac and Windows. And I've spent the last 12 months creating Fudgit 2, which is built on Vue 3 and the Composition API. In this course, you'll start by learning the key differences between the Options API and the Composition API, by creating a simple Options API app and converting it to the Composition API. Then you'll master all of the basics, including reactive data with refs and reactive objects, methods, computed properties and watchers, lifecycle hooks, directives, Vue router, child components, including the new ways of handling props, emits and model value, dynamic components, composables, how to create them from scratch, and how to import them from the Vue Use library, and you'll learn state management using Pinia, the incredible successor to Vuex. After learning these basics, you're going to create a real-world app called Noteballs from scratch, which has full CRUD capabilities, uses Pinia for state management, and demonstrates real-world use of all the basics that you learned earlier. After this course, you'll be able to create your own Vue 3 apps based entirely on the Composition API, completely from scratch. I've also added a brand new section on Firebase 9, where we're going to hook Noteballs up to a Firebase Cloud Firestore database. We're going to add authentication, so multiple users can register, log in and log out of our app. We'll add Realtime Data Sync, so that if a user makes a change on one device, they see the change instantly on another device. We'll add security rules to protect our users' data. Then we're going to host our finished app on Firebase hosting, so we can share it with anyone. This course requires a basic understanding of Vue 2 and the Options API, HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Please check out the preview videos, and I look forward to seeing you in the course.